that position. He was the king over the known world at the time. But his pride brought about a fall. But listen to what he come to understand when he came out from under that. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and my understanding returned unto me, and I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. And he doth according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand, or say unto him, What doest thou? Jump down to 37. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride is able to abase. So it was a hard lesson to learn, but Nebuchadnezzar learned it. If you look on a little more in the scriptures, though, you'll find that he was not able to pass that on to his offspring that took the kingdom after that. But that's not what I'm here to talk about tonight. Some people feel like, well, they view Satan as the opposite of God, the antithesis, I guess you would say. But that's not the case. Satan is not the opposite of God in the sense that he is the God of evil. He is in no ways as powerful as God. The authority that he has on this earth and in our lives is only what God has allowed him to do and preordained for him to have. And God's trying to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. He has set certain parameters for Satan to work within. Satan can go to and fro and create certain havoc in our life. But ultimately, God is in control of it all.
Yes, he is.
So our threads, he takes and weaves in and out. And the dark colored threads are there in the weaving, this tapestry also. And he weaves our threads in and out and around, even through the dark colors and there that bring forth light in those areas. And those threads are of certain length. Just like our lives. There's a certain length that God has to work with, a certain amount of time that he is able to create an effect in his tapestry with our lives. And I think about the billions and billions of people that have lived from the beginning of time, each of them represented by a thread, so long. And God has woven them all into this tapestry. And you think about the lives of like Abraham, Joseph, and others, and all the events in their lives, all of the things that occurred in their life that was woven into this tapestry, the difficulties they had, the low spots that they went through in life, and then the mountains that they might have been on for a short period of time. We know those don't last forever. We're not on those all the time. But I think of all those and how he created this majestic tapestry here. And one that come to mind was Jeremiah. And the first time I remember hearing about Jeremiah, I was still pretty young then, and I think it was my sister that gave a message on Jeremiah. And I think it kind of stuck with me, at least one part of that message. That seemed kind of unique to me, and but I believe Jeremiah's thread, however long it was, would be distinguishable in that tapestry. I almost believe you could pick it out. It would stand out, and I'll tell you why. What I remember about, I believe it was my sister's message that time, wasn't so much that Jeremiah was able to witness to Jerusalem, to Israel, to Judah, to warn them. God used him to warn them of what was going to come upon them, because they would not heed God's word. And he witnessed to these kings. But I remember the specific part where they had put him in a dungeon And that's what stuck with me out of that message. The prestige of witnessing to a king, but the fact that they put him in this dungeon, and what it turned out to be, if you run kind of references on that, and she brought that out, if I remember correctly. It wasn't a dungeon as we think of today in the sense it's just a damp, dark, deep hole in a castle or something. This place where they placed him happened to be the low spot. This is where all the waste was collected, gathered. They dropped him down in this pit, essentially what amounted to a sewer, a septic tank, septic system. So he was down there in all this muck and this mire. But he was there to honor God. He had done the job that God wanted him to do. And if you read the scriptures, there was a eunuch there that God used to ask for help. He was concerned that Jeremiah would die down there, as anybody would. But I remember that they gave him about 30 men or something like that, and he went and they formed this cord out of cloths and stuff long enough to reach down and pull Jeremiah out. But I think about Jeremiah and that sometimes the glory that God will allow us to experience will not come from the high things that we might do. But it's how much we're willing to yield our life to Him to go through those low spots that somehow or another is a witness to someone. That somehow or another stirs somebody that says, well, if they can do that, I can make it. It's those low points sometimes that are more effective at reaching people than the high things in life. But I was thinking that, as we've talked about before, that we could each be a little masterpiece of a thread. It's all by choice. If we choose to allow God to use us and do what He wants to do with our lives, and He can weave a bright emblem into this tapestry that He has. But it's up to us. We have to choose. And I wondered if God was to ask for volunteers, how many of us would be striving to get to the front of the line? Because, it would certainly mean us giving up our comfort zone.
Right.
It might mean leaving family, friends. It might to go to a mission field somewhere. Something. But I just wondered how many would be striving to get to the front of the line. My mind went back to when we were in school, and that the teacher was about time for the question period to begin. She'd start gazing around the classroom. And I remember doing this. After a little while, you kind of picked up on things. So, you would kind of try to act nonchalant or whatever. You wanted to kind of not be conspicuous, because you didn't want her eyes to fall on yours. Because just as sure as they did, you were gone. Okay? But you had to be careful that you didn't play the other part too much, because they were smart. They knew that if you were too inconspicuous, they needed to call. But I wondered how many of us would kind of be like that. Well, Lord, don't pick me for this one. Maybe the next one, Lord. But anyhow, in a sense, God has actually asked for volunteers. When He said, whosoever will, or when He said, I will work, who will let me?
That's it.
So it's out there for us, and it is our choice whether or not we actually